I'm pleased to share another perspective on the importance of childcare. We'll hear from 3 reporters who've been covering childcare and early learning, which we've rightly seen in the headlines quite a bit this past year. They will share some tips for those who want to build better relationships with reporters and make sure that these issues stay in the news. Let's welcome Jackie Mader from the Hechinger report, who will moderate a conversation with USA Today's Alia Wong and Chabeli Carrazana from the independent nonprofit newsroom, The 19th. Welcome. Over to you, Jackie.
Great. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Jackie Mader. I cover early childhood education for the Hechinger Report, which is a nonprofit education news outlet. I'm so excited to be here today with 2 very talented reporters, Alia Wong and Chabeli Carrazana, to talk about childcare in the media. I'm going to have each of them quickly introduce themselves and what they cover, and then we'll jump to our questions. Alia, maybe start with you.
Sure. So I'm Alia Wong. I cover inequities in education for USA Today. I've been there for about half a year now. Before that, I was at The Atlantic. And early learning counts for about half of my coverage.
Great. Thank you. Chabeli, what about you?
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here with you today. I'm Chabeli Carrazana. I'm the economy reporter with The 19th, and we're a nonprofit newsroom that launched about a year and a half ago. My focus this year has really been the women's recession and as well as, childcare solutions. And I used to be a reporter in Florida, actually, so I'm based here in Florida.
Great, thank you. So let's jump into our questions. As we know, there's been an uptick in coverage of early childhood issues in the media since COVID began, often from reporters who don't solely cover early ed or education. Can you explain why there's sudden media interest in the field, which, as we know, has been historically pretty invisible in the media?
Sure, I'll start. I think the pandemic spurred this sort of collision of epiphanies, right? Childcare and early learning started coming up more in everyday conversations just because of how the issues surrounding it were affecting all aspects of society, both in a micro and macro sense. These issues were really hard to ignore, whether you were a parent in the thick of it, a colleague, a friend, a relative of one of those parents, a small business owner whose experience or existence depended on workers having childcare, a politician who is seeing the childcare crisis, its impact on the economy. So for many, I think that crisis posed an almost existential threat, so it was impossible to ignore. And with that, I think it became incumbent on reporters on all beats, not just those who cover education or women's issues or the economy, to cover the intricacies of early learning. It's almost as if the all-encompassing nature of this crisis removed what I kind of feel like was a stigma that, early learning is reserved for reporters who cover quote unquote less serious topics. And I also think that part of the uptick was driven by these larger concerns about children's development right now, which I think combined with the realization that it's really hard to teach young kids remotely has underscored the stakes attached to early learning.
Great, thank you, Alia. Chabeli, what are your thoughts?
I would add to that we had a year where we had a shock to the system in the macro sense. For women in particular in the labor force, we lost 11 million jobs between February and May. That's a decade of progress in that time period. Half of all moms were out of work in April of 2020. It's just significant numbers, and that really made us think differently about what were the underlying causes of that problem. And so when we have a month like September 2020, when 865,000 women drop out of the labor force, 4 times the number of men in 1 month, that was the start of school last year. That was virtual school. That was, parents who were deciding, I'm going to drop out of my job, out of my career to take care of my kids because childcare has fallen apart. School is not available in person. And so I think when we see something that massive, something we've never seen in this country, we start to pay closer attention to something we honestly should have probably paid closer attention to before, right? Before we got to this issue, and what are the structures that are causing that, and how that is affecting the economy in every sense of the way. And so we also have really interesting proposals coming through Congress that I think have increased some focus on this subject. $225 billion for childcare has been proposed. We already have the $40 billion from earlier in the year of the American Rescue plan, 225 billion for universal paid leave, 200 for free universal pre-K. I mean, these are proposals that we haven't seen in this country. And so to be even talking about it and potentially looking at a plan that would include that, it takes everyone's attention, right? It's not just economy reporters or childhood and early education reporters, congressional reporters, political reporters. And I mean, this is, one of the biggest topics right now in politics. So I think a lot of that has driven this increased focus that, like I said, honestly, should have probably happened before we got to this point.
Yeah, very well put from both of you. Thank you so much. So many of us are hoping childcare issues obviously stay in the media well past COVID-19. But if interest fades, what would you suggest early childhood advocates, center owners, early childhood educators, what should they do to keep their issues in the media and top of mind for readers? How can these people become a trusted source for the media and pitch their stories?
To Chabeli's point, I think this problem pre-existed the pandemic, and it will continue to exist. So continue highlighting the stakes. We all know, I'm preaching to the choir here, that early learning isn't just about what children do during the day. It's about their development, their lifelong outcomes. It's about the health of the economy, the health, both literal and figurative, of society. So help reporters make those connections, I think, and emphasize that those stakes existed before the pandemic and will continue to exist once society returns to normal. I think, specifically when you're sending out a press release or reaching out to a reporter, incorporate human stories and compelling statistics. Make the issue you're trying to bring attention to tangible for reporters. And I think, don't be afraid to be bold and hold decision makers' feet to the fire. I think readers, and by extension reporters, they love a villain. And I'm not saying to contrive a bad guy, but if there is a clear bad guy, I think make that known. Our job as reporters is to hold people accountable, and you can help us do that.
Yeah, and I would add to that, I've had some really interesting conversations this year, because childcare wasn't something I was covering before, but I've had a lot of introductory calls with folks on the ground who are doing this work in different parts of the country. And those have been really illuminating for me, just to talk to someone about what are they seeing as the problems now? What are things that we could potentially talk about? I mean, I've had story idea after story idea come out of those initial conversations. So reaching out to reporters and just saying, hey, I just want to talk to you about, childcare and what's going on in my area, what this looks like. That has been great. And we did a story on mental health consultation and how much that has been successful in states that have taken it up in terms of bringing down expulsion rates, particularly for children of color across the country in childcare settings. And that's a story that came out of one of those calls, something that was completely not on my radar. But when I had that call and I heard about it, I thought this is something we could really look at as a potential childcare solution, how incorporating this consultation could help. And so I think there's a few things that stand out for us that we look for. We look for a compelling voice. Parents, teachers, folks who are in this that can tell us what it looks like day to day. We're looking for perhaps a time peg. Is Congress talking about something? Is there a bill that is being discussed? Is there something that's about to change? Is there money that's reaching states that is about to be used for childcare? Is there new data that can show us how effective a policy was or is not? And the fallout, we know, for example, American Rescue Plan dollar for childcare going out to the states. What are states going to use that for? Who's going to get it? Who is not going to get it? We are really focused on access. What does this really mean? We might be investing in childcare now, but what does that really mean in practice, and who benefits from that investment?
That's great. So if we could lay out, for the audience, kind of what we need from sources, what would you say? Like, what information or access, just to kind of lay out a list, is most helpful when we are approached by childcare providers or advocates?
One thing is it's always helpful if you offer to connect a reporter with real people who are grappling with a given issue. We always want those human perspectives and stories, and it can make our job easier if you already have people who you're in contact with who epitomize or somehow speak to the issue that you're trying to bring attention to. And I think what Chabeli was saying is, like, offer to be a thought partner. Some of my best sources are people who who are on the ground in early learning, throughout the country. And they're not just reaching out when they are interested in bringing attention to their center or to their community, but they're watching what's going on across the country and they're eager to help me. And so whenever I'm kind of trying to think through a story or trying to find some leads for sources or, just trying to gather the relevant research, because there's so much research out there, I'll reach out to those people, and those are kind of, in my Rolodex, they're on my speed dial for whenever I'm thinking through my reporting process.
Yeah, those trusted sources are huge. And just, my favorite folks to work with are the ones who say, hey, here's a parent who can talk to you about what this actually looks like. And here's this report from a few years ago that has some really interesting data points you might want to look at that show what this is. It sort of gives you some guidance on where are the pieces of context that you really need. And hey, I might want to connect you with this legislator who's been working on this for years and cares about this a lot. And they can really, give you kind of the big picture. That's what we're looking for is, some guidance on where to go, who to talk to, what might be good context, because y'all are the experts. And, we're trying to hear from you about what are the things I really need to include in this? Who do I need to talk to? And you'll know, and you'll be able to tell us. And that's what we're looking for, is sort of that collaborative experience.
Yeah, definitely. I also love when centers reach out and say, you're welcome to come visit if it's safe. I know it doesn't always feel safe right now. Or, I can connect you to a parent just to get more voices from the ground, like you both were saying. We have a few questions coming in. One is on trust, which we've talked about, trust, but someone is asking, how do I build trust with reporters to become a source? So what do you two look for, to know you can trust a source?
Well, I think I look for someone who is not always just coming to me to try to pitch me a story, who is saying, hey, I heard this, you might want to look into this. This is going on, maybe we've got so many things going on in any given day. And so it's hard to stay plugged into every topic we cover. So it's great to have someone who's like, hey, I saw this going on in Congress, there was this discussion going on about this topic. Maybe you want to look at that. And just sort of keeping up with someone and just staying in touch and keeping them up to date makes me feel plugged in, makes me feel like, I can trust them to keep me plugged in. That's important. And then, I think just being even keeled in terms of, bringing us good context and good research that is, based in some good outcomes and data that I can trust and comes from a good source. I mean, just sort of building that relationship over time. I mean, it's worth it. It's worth it. There are stories that have come out just out of those relationships over talking to someone over a period of time.
Yeah, the relationship building is key. And one thing, some of my best sources, they came about because I had sort of, just a virtual coffee date, or before COVID, an actual coffee date. And we just had an open-ended conversation where, that person just made themselves available to talk through things that, you might not have the chance to talk about when you're on deadline or trying to pursue a specific angle, just saying, this is what is happening in my community. What are you, asking the reporter, what sorts of stories are you interested in pursuing, offer ideas for angles, for specific communities to cover, start with those open-ended, just relationship building conversations, and that is bound to lead to some sort of a sustained trusted relationship.
Great. We have 2 minutes left. I'm going to do one more question, which I really love this one. How do you convey the topic of early childhood as a priority, in your newsrooms? How does it compete with other stories? I know this has been hard in the past. There are times where I've pitched my friends who cover, general topics and said, you should look into this. They're like, they won't do an early ed story. So how do you pitch these? How do you convince your editors that this is important?
Well, go ahead, Alia.
Yeah, I'm lucky in that it's never hard to convince my editor, the people in my newsroom, of the importance of what I'm covering. In part because my editor, she's a mom of 2 young kids, so she understands, this is her lived experience. But I think, for people who might not themselves be grappling day to day with childcare, early learning, or who, haven't been exposed to the stakes, trying to make it relatable, highlighting the lived experiences of people who they relate to, showing again that this isn't just a topic reserved for childcare or education or economy reporters. It is interconnected. It touches all aspects of life, of society, and so really underscoring that this is something we all are living with.
Yeah, and I mean, in our newsroom, also not difficult to pitch these kinds of stories. This is what our newsroom is built around. But I think the pandemic has really made the case in reality. I think that's what's going to help a lot of other newsrooms that maybe haven't prioritized this coverage in the past to, go back and look. This is what happened when we didn't do this. This is what happened when we didn't focus on this. We had all these people who couldn't even work, and so really the stakes is the big one. Pointing out that early childhood matters for, your educational outcomes, future outcomes, economic outcomes, how this affects the economy. I mean, we've been talking so much about the child tax credit, right? And how this could lift so many kids out of poverty. And we're really zooming out and talking about, other countries have done this and we have not tried it this way. And so here we are doing this, and this is what it looks like in the real lives of real people who can now, afford to buy diapers. It's just like really talking about, this is something that touches, like Alia said, every bit of society. And we saw it viscerally in our living rooms this year when everything fell apart because childcare and early learning fell apart too. And why we're investing in it, or talking about investing in it significantly for the first time, what that'll look like. I think there'll be no shortage of story ideas coming out of a year like this.